Hello everyone and welcome to the Make Your Own Noise podcast. My name is Jack Negro. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is on building and sustaining discipline. We're going to talk about how to build discipline, why is it important, how to build and sustain it, how does discipline and motivation relate to one another, positive habits, and where many of us get stuck. So first of all, let's just talk about why is discipline so important for creatives? And I had a really good think on this and had two kind of real points I wanted to talk about. The first one is we often work for ourselves. No matter the industry, working for yourself requires a high level of discipline as we are solely responsible for ourselves. We do not have a boss breathing down our necks, setting our schedules, to-do lists, and often we don't even have teammates relying on us and asking where we're at with things. So for a start, for us to be disciplined as creative professionals, it's because we often work for ourselves, and that requires a huge amount of discipline. The other reason I feel that building and sustaining discipline is so important for us as creatives is that our creative minds often push the boundaries regularly. This is an amazing thing, but it can often be then to the detriment of other areas of our life and our business. We all know that feeling where we get so heavily invested in a project and it's the most important thing of our focus and all consuming. And yeah, other areas of our life and business can fall to the wayside during those periods. I've been very guilty of it myself. And I have found in recent years, having certain areas of my life with a lot of discipline can really be the antidote to those things falling away when we're all consumed in big projects. But now you're probably asking, well, does this mean discipline kills creativity? And absolutely not. I feel the biggest killer of creativity is stress. A vital component of creativity is you must allow space in your mind for creativity to arise. Stress completely clogs this space. If you're feeling stressed and strung out, you have not left space within yourself for creativity to even show itself. So what is stress? Stress is a lack of control. Usually all situations where you are stressed, it's because in some area or another, you're not in control. And being disciplined in your actions can help maintain levels of control in these other areas of your life. So some examples of areas where I've really tried hard to be disciplined that have helped my business and areas of my life, sending emails before work, prioritizing sleep before and during big projects, regularly keeping up to date with my health and activity when I am inside a lot on big projects. Those sorts of things keep the other areas of my life in control, and that, like I said, that control alleviates stress, which allows creativity to arise. We often look at the word discipline as a harsh or hard word that feels more something from a military perspective than a creative one. But how about viewing discipline from a place of self-love? Doing something that's best for your future self. Because in the end, that's what discipline is. You're doing something difficult or that you don't maybe feel like doing now that's hard for the positive benefit of your future self. So today we're going to go through the two key areas for how to build and sustain discipline. I'm going to go through and highlight where many people get stuck and how to overcome this as well. That part is probably the heart of this podcast, and I really hope you get some useful takeaways. So the first way to build and sustain discipline is to find sources of motivation. When we are motivated, it is so much easier to do difficult things often required of us. I know what you're thinking, well, that's easy, but I don't feel motivated right now. I hear you, and I am about to give you some useful tips to become motivated later in this podcast, and hopefully that will help you overcome lack of motivation. So I find there are two main sources of motivation. The first is to have a role model or someone you look up to, not in a comparison way to make you feel like crap, in a way that someone inspires you, whether it's the way they act, talk, the way they've set up their lifestyle, their energy, what they do for work or in their art. Having someone to look up to and somewhat be able to role model yourself to you can really harness that to be a very motivating force for you. And the second way is building a clear vision of your ideal future and where you want to be, that North Star that I've referenced in other episodes. To envision this future, you need to give yourself space, though, and stillness to build this future in your mind and become very clear of where you want to be and the feelings you want to be generating. Check out my podcast on post-study overwhelm to hear me talk a bit more about this. So they are the two main sources of motivation: having a role model and having a clear vision of your ideal future, something and someone to aspire and aim for. But there are also two main forces or fuels for motivation: love and fear. I suggest finding ways to motivate yourself more through positive actions, love, than through avoiding negative consequences, which is fear. I'll just repeat that. Find ways to motivate yourself more through positive actions, which is love, than through avoiding negative consequences, fear. It's more sustainable long-term, I find. But if you are scared of ending up in some kind of negative future, or you're hurt, or you're angry or sad, then by all means, harness these powerful emotions as well. Just rounding out this section on motivation as well, there's a fantastic book by Brendan Burchard that I highly recommend. It's called The Motivation Manifesto, and it's so poetically written and inspiring. And if any of you are listening to this lacking motivation, I'm going to go into that a bit more shortly, but it's an easy read. It's not a long book. It's just a fantastic book that I've reread 3 times, and I highly recommend that. So if you do take a listen and read it, please let me know. So something really important I want to talk about now is, what is the relationship between motivation and discipline? They are completely independent of each other. Motivation is an energy. Discipline is an action you take irrespective of motivation. Building and sustaining discipline is relatively easy when you are motivated. Building and sustaining discipline can be very difficult when you are not motivated. This is where the second way to build and sustain motivation comes into play, which I'm going to talk about now. So the second way to build and sustain discipline is we need to learn to build new habits. Habits help us sustain positive actions and discipline, irrespective of if we feel motivated or not. A habit is something we can do in a somewhat automated way, therefore not really requiring as much thought or effort. I'm not going to go too much into how to build great habits. If you want to learn more about that, grab a copy of James Clear's Atomic Habits. He has heaps of great tips in that. He talks about how to build an identity, which is something I was referring to before with your future self or a role model. Also things like surrounding yourself with the right people, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Again, that kind of links into the role model thing a little bit, and a community you build around yourself. Making your initial habits small and achievable. He has loads of great tips through it. So if building habits and sticking to them is something you're struggling with, grab a copy of that book. It's a fantastic read. Some positive habits that have really worked well for me in running my own business while still feeling creative are, I really try and get exercise in before work, and proper sleep, so I hit the studio feeling really fresh. I have periods of time away from my phone, as I said before. That really helps. I have a very, detailed, organized calendar, which really helps keep things in check. All those sort of things, I argue, are pretty universal anyway, but to me, they have had a very profound impact on my life, my creativity, and my business. So we've come to understand the importance of discipline for many of us working in the creative fields. Discipline is really beneficial for anyone, but as I said earlier, we are often working for ourselves in the creative industries. We also often have the tendency to get hyper-focused and really invested in what we do, and that can lead to other areas of our life falling by the wayside, whether it's our physical health, our relationships, our finances, our emails, even just the business side of our business that is not the creative side. So by learning to build and sustain discipline in certain areas, that can help those things not fall away. And I feel that with that happening, we are less stressed as we know those other things are in order, which then in turn gives us more of a feeling of creativity because we're not stressed. I hope that made sense. It made sense in my head. We now also know that the 2 key ways to build discipline that we've just talked about are to find sources of motivation, so someone or something to aspire or aim for, and to build positive habits. But there is still a point here where many of us get stuck, and this is the real heart of the podcast, I think. What if we just can't find the motivation to even look or search for sources of inspiration to motivate us, and we can't even drag ourselves up to begin building positive habits? Basically, what if we are not motivated enough to even have anything to aim for and even get started at aiming for it? If this is how you're feeling right now, you're not alone, and I hope we can help you with this today. Tony Robbins says, change happens when the fear of staying the same outweighs the fear of change. Now, if you find yourself in an unmotivated state right now that I've just mentioned, I dare argue that things probably are not great for you, but they could also be far worse too. Mediocrity can kill action and motivation. So yes, maybe you do feel flat, you're a bit uninspired, you're just sad, but your circumstances are not so dire that you're almost forced to make a change. Whether this is the case for you or you're genuinely just not in a great space right now, it is a frustrating place to be in. So what do? Again, I guess this is now the heart of the podcast. How do we become disciplined even when we are really lacking motivation and we don't yet have habits formed? There really is only one answer, and I have referenced it before in other podcasts. I have a few tips to help with this, but the only real answer is act. Just act. If you want to be disciplined, you must train it like a muscle, just like building habits as well. It takes time to build discipline, and the only way to do that is through repeated action. One of my favorite quotes is, you cannot think yourself into feeling differently, but you can act yourself into feeling differently. So you might have a big task at hand that seems really daunting. The more you sit there and don't take action and think about it, it's going to become more daunting, and it's going to make action even harder. So just throw yourself in and act. Act on a positive habit or on a task that you know is in your best interest. Each time you do it, it will become slightly easier, and slowly it becomes a habit. Your positive actions will not only start becoming easier as they become habits, but you're also becoming more motivated to do so as you see the reactions to your positive actions. This is the cycle and flow you will find yourself in when you just learn to act. So let me repeat that one more time, because that's probably the absolute crux of this. I know I've used that word a fair few times, but when you just learn to act, not only are your positive actions becoming easier as you start to build them into habits, but you will start to become more motivated as you see positive reactions to your actions. So a few tips to just help that initial point of action, and there's so many things you can do to just help that initial moment of action. And again, many of these can be found in Atomic Habits and many other productivity, self-help podcasts and books. But a few that worked for me are make the action small. I constantly repeat that consistent small efforts create big results. Don't make the action so large it is overwhelming to start. Our brains are designed to be energy efficient. It's what kept us alive for a long time. So keep the action small and simple as you start. By completing them, you will feel an innate reward, which will help the positive cycle begin. Another thing, remove barriers to the action. If you want to get up early to go to the gym, lay your clothes out the night before. You want to find time to write more songs? Then say no to a social event that has nothing special about it, or block out time in your calendar to a future date if you're free. For me, for this podcast, the initial overwhelm of how does it look? What can I talk about? What can I do? It stopped me from even just recording a podcast. So I thought of one topic and just started, and everything fell into line from there. And now I'm so much more excited and motivated to do each one as it's becoming easier, as it's a habit, and I'm getting some nice reactions from people in the external world that's motivating me to do more. So I've built a habit, and I'm also more motivated as I am seeing results. One final way too is make checklists or reward systems. Even if it's for tiny tasks, write a list and tick it off. Our brains love that kind of stuff. If you have a TV show you're dying to watch tonight, promise yourself you can watch it after you send 5 emails to prospective clients, or that you clear out your inbox. But I do find our brains react really well to that kind of thing in terms of set yourself little rewards and box ticking and checklists. So there are a few small examples of ways to just learn to act. And I just want to go back to a point. I'm kind of just spitballing this out loud, and I hope this flows well. But there's also just a part, it's just sometimes sheer willpower. And there's a dangerous place in mediocrity. Your circumstances, like I said before, they might not be so dire that you're forced to make a change. And you might just be living in this kind of numb, null middle ground where things aren't so bad that you don't have to change, but they definitely could be better. And that's a damn scary place to be in too. If you find yourself there and you think that could be you, I really hope you can summon some just sheer willpower from inside to take the actions to the next steps that you really want for your future. For some of you out there listening to this where maybe things aren't as great and you do feel a bit desperate, whether it's financially, your mental health, other circumstances that I'm, sorry to hear about. As I said with that Tony Robbins quote before, when the fear of staying the same for you outweighs the fear of making a change, you will force yourself into action. And that willpower it's almost not willpower, it's circumstances thrusting you into it as well. So whatever the scenario is, there is still, I guess, at the end of this whole podcast, a big part of this comes down to needing to find some inner willpower as well, to force yourself into action. That action helps motivate you for further action. It helps create positive habits, which make the actions easier. And that is the cycle and flow you find yourself in. And you know what? It's not always sustainable. Those things fall away and change. Circumstances happen and you do lose motivation. Your habits can fall away. But every time you pick yourself back up and you readjust to new habits, or you get back to your old positive habits, it becomes easier and easier. And every time you do it, you see that process and how it unfolds, and you back yourself in to do it. And that's a really beautiful place of self-confidence to be in, that I hope many of you find. I hope this podcast helped you today. For anyone listening, please let me know your thoughts. I love hearing from you, the messages, the DMs, comments, shares, anything. It really means a lot. If you love this podcast, please recommend it to anyone you feel could benefit from it. Give it a follow, a like, a subscribe, all that stuff. It obviously really helps this reach more people. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. I look forward to hearing from you, and I really look forward to the next episode. Go out there, make your own noise, and I will be back soon.